This is one of the most powerful things you can do as a project manager, but it can also be one of the hardest, and that's asking questions. Because asking questions can be a superpower as a project manager. And the saying goes, if you don't ask, you don't get. And there are so many missed opportunities to ask good questions, good open questions, or sometimes quite blunt ones to get the answers you need on a project. Because if you don't, assumptions are created on both sides. And there's nothing worse than thinking, I should have asked that question. It did seem obvious at the time, but I just didn't have the confidence to speak up. And then that can have a knock on effect because in many cases, those actually being asked will appreciate it as well because either they then had to think a little bit differently about, oh, good question. Actually, what we should do is, X, Y, and Z. Or they may not have had the confidence to say what they need or what they know needs to be shared. And quite often, it's the really obvious questions that need answering. But people think, well, everybody knows the answer to that. I shouldn't need to ask that. But you never know. You've made an assumption. An assumption are project killers. So as a project manager, asking good question puts you in a really good position for these following reasons. One, you get the answers you need, or you're much more likely going to get the answers you need on a project, which often can mean you discover problems that you'd rather have on day one. So don't put it off by asking that tough question rather than day 50 of like a 60-day project. It can also elevate you as a leader in the room rather than just being an action taker in the background. Someone who's thinking a little bit differently, who's prepared to ask those tougher questions or just questions in general that gets you noticed. Otherwise, if you're just there taking notes, that's it, then people aren't even going to realize you're there and you're going to miss out on an opportunity. Asking questions also means you have fewer meetings because you get the answers you need when you're actually in one rather than thinking about it after the fact and go, oh, right, I need to get the team back in now because I don't know this and I don't know that. Ask, you won't regret it. And it also builds up your confidence because the more you speak to people in front of people, you discover more, you generate more conversations, and that is going to have an impact on your confidence. And it also creates more opportunities because the more people you speak to, the more conversations you have, and the more opportunities will come your way because people remember you. Like that first point, opportunities are often created by someone just remembering, oh, yes, I remember that guy in that meeting. Oh, yeah, he's asked me a really good question. Right, I think I might go and speak to him about that. But if you were just in the background doing nothing and just taking notes, they're not going to remember you. And you never know what that might mean for you in your career or even a future job. In a 2 years' time, someone might remember you just in that moment. And then the final point is it also has a knock on effect because you can become a much better listener, which is another superpower as a project manager because the better listener you are, so active listening, the more you can discover. And it's not always exactly what they say is like the true meaning. You sometimes have to dig a little bit deeper, but if you're listening really well, you go, oh, they don't know what they really want right now. So I need to ask another question here to help tease out that information. So what questions work well for you? If they've worked, write them down, reuse them, adapt them. Different questions for different situations. You might ask some questions or some certain questions in a kickoff meeting, other ones in a retrospective, other ones in a one-to-one with a client. It can differ. But the more questions you ask, like I said, the more confident you become in asking them.